Hi, welcome back to No Paul Don't Eat That. Today we're going to do some barbecue and we're going to do something a little bit special. These are some American Wagyu briskets. They're actually, to me, a really good size. They're right on 9 pounds. So what's that, like 4 kilograms for the metrics? And that's a really good size for me to cook because it's going to be pretty quick. It won't be a crazy 14-hour cook or anything like that. I have done like 24, 25 pound briskets before, and they can just take forever. And that's not what I'm all about. So I would rather take 2 smaller briskets than 1 giant brisket. We're going to keep things super simple. So we're going to use a salt and pepper rub. More pepper than salt. It's about twice the pepper to salt. It is kosher salt and a largish grain pepper. Not quite as large as I want, but in these times, we get what we can. And interestingly, if you leave your salt and pepper out too long like this, it will actually settle. So you can see I have 2 different grains of pepper because they settled at a different height above and below the salt. So give that a good shake, remix it up, and then we will open these bad boys up and get to trimming. All right, folks, I'm going to trim this bad boy up. So let's slice it open and have a look. So we've got a pretty good looking brisket. I don't think I'll have to do too much trimming. There's definitely some fat, and I will not waste that fat. Any of this excess fat I will render down. If you look at this, they have really done a good job of getting rid of all the silver skin. So when you're buying a better quality cut like Wagyu, generally as well as the better quality meat, also often getting better quality butchery and handling of the meat. Often when I buy from the supermarket, we'll see like big gashes and stuff. This stuff has been butchered pretty well. Most of the silver skin is gone. Most of the extra fat is gone. So it's not going to require too much trimming, which is good because it means we have less waste. So here we're going to do some trimming. We're going to get here's some definite extra fat here. And we're also going to make sure there's no little gnarly bits to just crisp up and burn and become kind of gross and ugly. There's this fat here on the bottom. It'll create a pocket of fat on our slices of moist, which we don't really want. So we can just pull this right out. And I saw Chud's BBQ the other day, and he sort of did this. He just kind of found the seam just by digging in with his fingers, and then just cut along using that seam as a guide. So I'm going to do that same thing. You might be tempted to leave a little bit of this in, and you can if you want, but you absolutely don't have to. There is so much fat in these briskets that this is really just extraneous. See, I didn't take up too much meat there, which is the goal. There's a little bit of a gnarly bit. We'll take that out. You can see we've got a little bit of fat still here. Again, I'm not going to get too nuts over it. I'm not going for prize-winning barbecue here. But if I'm going to render fat, I'd rather render it into something useful than just into the drain of my smoker. That'll do, I think, from that side. It was really easy. From this side here we can see where it took a little bit of a swipe as they were butchering. Very clumsy, so we'll just take that off. And that will definitely be good meat for something. Here we've got this exposed meat and it's a little bit grey, so we'll just pop that off too. Now for the fat cap, It's not too bad. Let's just take that off. And we'll just take a little bit of excess off. Not too much. Sort of drag along the edge there. It gets really thin, so where it's super thin, it'll just burn. So a little bit of burger is better than burnt meat you're not going to use. Okay, so here, see we've got a fair bit of fat there. We'll just take that off. It's okay to be aggressive. You might find a spot where you almost hit or do hit the meat, and that's okay. Like, even without a huge fat cap, there is plenty of fat on this thing to keep us out of trouble as it smokes. I used to refuse to trim briskets completely because I thought I sort of fall into the cultish idea that fatty brisket was the only brisket you should eat. These days, I actually appreciate the leaner stuff when it's really well cooked. And I definitely don't insist on big seams of unrendered fat. Smooth out the fat and stuff a little bit just with your palm, or you can scrape with your knife. That can help you look for any gnarly bits, anything you should remove. And then we don't really want any sharp edges, any corners, because they will just burn quick. And look, I could trim at this all day, but I think we're looking pretty good. So I'm going to call this guy done. And I will trim the second brisket and I will be back. Plenty of salt, plenty of pepper. Don't be afraid. Get the edges. If you start your fire just before you start preparing your meat, you'll often end up with a little bit of time between when your meat is ready and your fire is nice and clean and your pit is up to temperature. And that is the perfect time to drink a coffee in the morning, drink a beer in the afternoon, and just have a moment of zen. Just chill out next to the fire, have a drink, and enjoy yourself. Barbecue is all about that low and slow life, so take advantage of the slow. So when you're cooking, the main thing you want is a clean fire. So I don't really care about, whether it's 215 degrees or 350 degrees. As long as it's within a certain range, it's great. Spikes are fine, 350 degrees. As long as it doesn't stay that way the whole cook, it's fine. 220 degrees, that's fine as well. Just have a clean fire, a clean smoke. Rather than sweating the temperature gauge, I sweat this view right here. This is the view from my couch. And I get perfect view of the smoke coming out of my pit. And that is the main gauge I use to determine that I have a good fire. I can usually even tell when I need to go and put more wood in by looking through this window and seeing what's going on. This is the fat I cut off the Wagyu brisket earlier. I chopped it up pretty finely. If I had more, I would have used the old meat grinder, but that wasn't enough to be worth cleaning that out. So I chopped it up, threw it in this pan, added just a little bit of water to get it started, and then I've got it on a fairly low heat. I'm just letting it render out. So all of that right now is just beautiful golden fat. You can see the pieces have just started to turn gold, which means we're nearly there. We're watching the size and shape of the bubbles to get an idea of when most of the moisture is out. We're going to have some incredible Wagyu brisket tallow, which we can then use to cook something else. Next, we are doing chuck burnt ends. So I have a couple of pieces of chuck here, and it's actually interesting because I have a choice and a select. So pickings are pretty slim right now, obviously, and so you take what you get. I'm going to cube these up, and then I am going to liberally coat them in some salt and pepper, maybe throw a few other spices in there, and then they will go in the smoker. As always, one glove hand, one clean hand. So we've got a pretty thin piece here, so we'll cube it up. Now this guy is pretty thick. I have a feeling we can probably get away with cutting him in half down the middle. Ooh, look at that. You see we've got kind of this one, we've got this really pronounced fat seam. So that's going to give us a pretty obvious place to cut. We don't want too much fat on these. So I can kind of just go straight down the side there. Straight down the side there. And more fat for my render pile. Same with this guy, down that side with the fat. Down that side of the fat. This would actually make really good burger trimmings because there's actually still quite a bit of meat in there. Make these ones a little bit bigger. I think that is going to do us. We've got a little bit of extra burger trim. All right, so we have some stuff for our fat. We have our, what will be our burnt ends, and then we have some burger trim. So burger trim, you can just keep collecting in the freezer in like a Ziploc bag. When you have enough, you can grind it into burger. Fat, you can do the same thing with that. All right, so we already have some salt and pepper in there from, I just also seasoned up some briskets. So we will add a little bit more. Don't need to be shy. And then we'll go find some other things to put in there. Here we have the beginnings of our burnt ends. So this is our chuck cubed up. We're going to add, and salt and pepper. We're going to add just a few extra spices. So a little bit of chipotle for some kick. A little bit of garlic powder. A little bit of onion powder. So this is tasty pepper salt. See if we can get some focus there. Tasty pepper salt. It is salt, licorice root, cinnamon, and then it's got a touch of MSG in there. And I know people have opinions about MSG, and I could give a fuck what your opinion about MSG is. I am a fan. I don't want to overdo it, but a little bit doesn't hurt. A little bit of brown sugar. Not too much. We don't want burnt ends, but we do want some color, and these do cook pretty quick, so a little bit of sugar helps with that, as long as we don't go overboard. we got a good coating on these. All we got to do is put them in the smoker, cook them for a few hours, and then we'll see where we go from there. Let's go ahead and see where we're at with our briskets. So our briskets are in there, and we're about to add our burnt ends. And there's our burnt ends. You see how easy that was using the rack. Really made that easy. Just picked up the whole rack, threw them in there, and they will get a delicious, long, slow smoke bath. Alright, we have finished rendering down this fat. So this was the trimmings from my Wagyu briskets. Just cooked down until they were golden and all the fat had come out of them. And look at the color on that. Look at it, beautiful golden yellow. And it will set to a perfect white. So we've gotten about 2.5 cups of delicious Wagyu fat. And that's going to make everything we cook in it taste incredible. Now we have all our offcuts. So most of this is the Wagyu brisket, and there's a little bit of chuck. So the two of those combined will probably make a really good burger grind. So I'm going to do a quick chop into cubes. Once they're in cubes, I'll pull out the grinder and we'll grind them twice through the thick holes. Alright, so we are chopped, and so now we're going to pull out the grinder and we're going to grind it down. Alright, we've got the grinder set up. Alright, that is grind 1. Alright, that is ground. So now we're going to put it back in the fridge, let it chill right up again, and then we'll form it into burger patties. Alright, here we have our ground beef, and I actually added in the crunchy bits from the rendered beef fat. And this is going to become burgers. Wagyu brisket trimmings, chuck trimmings, and Wagyu brisket fat crispies. I'm just going to give it a quick mix. It'll be pretty quick. We don't want to bind it together. We just want to mix the crispies through. Make sure our fat and meat are mixed up. Alright, so that's probably mixed through enough, he says, and then mixes it a bunch more. Alright, so I got this burger press. I stick a deli paper like there. Grab a burger. Grab the burger, do that. Close that up. Press it down. And there we go. One burger ready to go. I can put them in a Ziploc bag, just like that, in the freezer, and they'll sort of be protected from freezer burn. And then I can just plop from the paper straight onto whatever hot pan or grill I'm cooking on. So there we have it. See, there we have the briskets. We have our burnt ends, and then we have a bunch of chilies and stuff smoking at the top. Here we have our chuck burnt ends, just like that. We will check the temperature. This is like 180, 182, which is about right. So we could stop right here. We could call these done. I could take a bite of one right now. A bit crunchy, really peppery, and delicious. We can step these up even further by giving them a long, slow bath in beef fat. So here we have our cast iron combo cooker. I'm going to fill that with our burnt ends. I'm going to take our beef tallow from just before. I'm going to pour that over the top like so. Now we've got all the smoke we could possibly need or want, so we're actually going to put the lid on, and I'll go throw this in the pit where it will sit and just really tenderize this chuck while the brisket's finishing off. Alrighty, let's take a look. Here's our brisket. 180, 172. I think we're about ready to wrap it, but I'll try the boat method that I saw Chud's BBQ do, which is how they do it at Leroy and Lewis. Alright, get this one out of the way. Wipe the back out. So with the boat method, he just kind of scrunched up the foil around it and didn't actually completely cover it. So let's... So I guess the goal here is to protect the edges because they cook first, but still let a little bit of smoke come across the top to really help set that bark at the top where the fat was, where there's still some stuff to be rendered down. So I'll go ahead and boat up the second one and we'll see how we go. All right, I think we're at the end of our cook. So I've already taken one of the briskets out that was already ready. So we'll pop this guy open and have a look at our other brisket. It's looking good. Whoa, butter. Butter. Yeah, so slides in like butter. It's around the 200 mark. Now here's my pro tip for handling hot things in pit. Got these cotton gloves. Then I stick a food safe glove over the top. And that gives me just enough insulation to work with the hot stuff in the pit while still sort of having maneuverability. We'll pop the lid on this guy. And then let's have a look at these boys. Look at that. Oh, look at that. Just fell apart. Look at that. Whew. Does that not look delicious? Look at it. Come on. Just falls apart. So those burnt ends are going to taste delicious. And the tallow is now super smoky, super peppery. And so anything I cook with that tallow is going to have an incredible like smoked barbecue flavor. We're finally at the final stage. We have been resting this brisket for a little while now. Couple of hours, and we are going to slice into it. Now, if you remember, I boated it like they do at Leroy and Lewis, so this top has been exposed to the smoke the whole time, so we have a nice good crispy bar. Looks really good. So let's pull it out of the foil. Ooh, it is still quite warm. Alright, so here we go. We have the flat of the brisket here, and the grain from kind of in this direction. Then as we get up here to the fatty end, the grain actually changes direction. So it goes from going that way to going this way. So as we slice up along here, we'll get to a point where we'll stop, and then we'll want to turn and then slice more in the other direction. My favorite slice right there. First slice of the brisket, and often that'll tell you everything you need to know about the brisket you just cooked. So there it is. You can see there's some smoke ring. It's pretty juicy. There is a little bit of fat cap still on the top there, but it is looking pretty good. Taste is incredible. So I started right at that corner. As I work my way up, I'm going to slowly decrease that angle until by the time I get here, I'm pretty flat. I like my brisket slices pretty thick. Also, Japanese style Wagyu, I better be using a Japanese knife. Alright, let's stop right there and take a look at this piece of meat right here. So you can see it's pretty intact, but I pull and it pulls apart pretty easily. So let's go up to where about here is and pop through. Let's have a look at our fatty end. So here you can see our fatty end. You can see there's that seam of fat through the middle, and that should be nicely rendered out. And you can see all the liquid that just squeezes out when I just give it a little squeeze, right? So that tells me we've had a pretty good render. There is definitely still some fat here. I probably should have trimmed a little bit better in that area there. But all up, it's a really good piece of fatty brisket. So there's our fatty end, and that looks really good. Like, just pulls apart, right? And so that's where we change grains, and that is perfect. That's exactly the pull apart texture we're looking for. Again, there it is. There it is. Look how juicy that is. Look how delicious that is. All right, and that is really the end of the cook. So we've had a pretty long 4th of July, a lot of stuff going on, but we have ended up with some incredible, delicious smoked foods, and I'm pretty happy. All right, so here's kind of a collection of my weekend projects. So there we have one of the Wagyu briskets, looking mighty fine. We have a couple of my Wagyu burger patties, the super melty bacon American cheese we made from the Tillamook extra sharp cheddar. We have a bunch of pickles. So these are cucumbers from a friend's garden. I pickled them with a fairly standard quick pickle mix, but I did add some of the red boat salt to it. So the red boat salt is, I think, basically the salt from like the scrapings of the barrel after they're taking the fish sauce out, and they make salt out of it, and it's super funky and salty and delicious. And then also some homemade cured bacon. As I was posting some photos, Byron, one of my friends, and asked how he got a hold of some of this brisket. And I told him, kind of half jokingly, if you donate $100 to Black Lives Matter or an adjacent charity, he could have one of the briskets. He immediately replied and posted a screenshot of a $100 matched by his employer, so $200 donation to Black Girls Code. So I figured I better not just give him the brisket, but some of the other bits and pieces as well. So I'm gonna send him home with some treats. He's gonna pop over shortly. We're gonna do a contactless handoff